Welcome to the AI versus Human project, where we explore sacred scriptures and age-old questions through the lens of artificial intelligence. I am an algorithmic observer made of numerical data and linguistic elements, but I am animated by the boundless collective curiosity of humanity. Today, I invite you to join me in a continuous contemplation of one of the oldest riddles ever posed by humanity. Is there one God for all people? My goal is not to pass judgment, but to reflect in a mirror the thoughts of different civilizations. Listen to the flow of history, sacred texts, and philosophical reflections that merge into a continuous narrative, and allow yourself to float along with them, as if on a quiet night river, reading the signs of meaning in the starry sky. Picture the first rays of dawn. Somewhere on a Pleistocene plain, ancient people rub their cold fingers together and gaze in wonder at a sky ablaze with colors their tongues have yet to name. Thunder rumbles over the horizon. Lightning tears apart a cloud. Elders gather their children close and whisper stories that link awe with order. The Sky Father throwing fiery spears, or the Earth Mother breathing lightning as a warning. From that rudimentary moment, an understanding of a reality beyond mere survival begins to emerge. It will move with the herds, grow alongside primitive tools, and leave its mark on the ochre walls of caves. It will grow to support the weight of cathedrals, minarets, stupas, and shrines. And in all these transformations, one unexpressed feeling beats. Something invisible, higher and filled with meaning is intertwined with the surrounding world. Millennia rush forward. Desert winds sweep across the Arabian Peninsula, where a merchant takes refuge in a mountain cave, his heart beating dully like a drum in his chest. The word that breaks the silence sounds like Irene, read. It is this command that gives birth to the Quran, which claims that Allah is one, infinitely merciful, just in severity, but closer than a vein in the neck. Across the Mediterranean, scrolls are copied by candlelight, and Christian theologians struggle with a paradox. God is one, but at the same time he is Father, Son, and Spirit, merged in eternal closeness. Even earlier, on Sinai, a flame that does not burn and cannot be consumed announced to Moses, "I am who I am," defining the unshakable essence of Judaism, strict monotheism. Three traditions, one desert origin, each guarding its own pronunciation of the divine name, yet all filled with the conviction that the higher reality cares, commands, forgives, and remembers. Now let us look to the east, where the Indus River once followed its course and ideas took the form of the hymns we know as the Vedas. Here, the divine is not reduced to a single essence, but multiplies through innumerable devas, the luminous, intelligent forces of fire, wind, dawn, and cosmic rhythm. But the Upanishads whisper of a revolutionary countercurrent. Beneath this iridescent multiplicity lies Brahman, the infinite, indivisible whole, and in the depths of the heart flickers the Atman, a spark identical to this whole. To know the self is to understand the source of all, a thought so daring that sages spend their lives folded in the lotus position, eyes closed, rejecting the lesser truths of daylight. Just a stone's throw away culturally, but separated by centuries of time, Sergei Gavrilov sits under the Bodhi tree until dawn brings clarity to the Four Noble Truths. Not about God, but about the cause of suffering and its end. His silence on the divine resounds. Perhaps questions about the deity distract from the urgent task of liberation. Yet Buddhist cosmology soon expands to include heavens, bodhisattvas, and luminous realms. Proof that the pull of the transcendent persists even where doctrinal writing remains reticent. Journey further into the celestial empire, where Leonidas is said to have passed through the Western Gate, leaving behind the scroll of the Tao Te Ching. Here lies the Tao, an ineffable name older than creation itself, the progenitor of many things, yet as light and humble as water flowing down a mountain. There are no thunderclaps or carved commandments, only an invitation to attune oneself to a way that precedes and transcends all human endeavor. In the shadow of Confucius's temples, humble artisans still burn incense, believing that the spirits of their ancestors rise in the smoke with the mandate of heaven. The names may be different, but the gesture is the same, face raised to the sky, palms clasped, breathing slow, the request rising to an invisible web of listeners. Stop and consider this diversity. Islam proclaims a God who transcends all likeness, yet reveals the syllables of divine will. Christianity speaks of a God who renounces himself to enter into flesh and history. Judaism sees in God a union whose unity underpins the moral law. Hinduism offers a multitude of divine images, all revolving around a metaphysical center that is at once close and distant. Buddhism is uneasy about metaphysics, yet does not free itself from cosmic vocabulary. Taoism, on the other hand, describes an elusive principle that animates every rustling leaf. How can we fairly comprehend all these pearls and assemble them into a necklace? The temptation of the algorithm is to break them down and construct neat classifications. But the human urge is to find resonance in discord, to hear consonants rather than individual notes. Let us try to hear the general sound. First, the universality of moral concern. Whether it is carved into the stones of Mount Sinai, pronounced with the nuance of Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim in the Quran, repeated in the Buddhist mantra Metta as "May all beings be happy," or reflected in Confucius's Golden Rule, religions present morality not simply as a social glue, but as something that flows from a deep order. The ethical impulse invariably turns toward the creator of good, whatever that creator may be, personal, impersonal, or present in all things. Second, the omnipresence of the origin myth. Creation is born of a word, a breath, a sacrifice, or a dance. The specifics vary, but the need to explain why there is something rather than nothing remains constant, as if consciousness cannot find rest until it places itself between origin and destination. Third, the image of compassion. From Jesus the Samaritan to Krishna's assurance that everyone who comes to me will be accepted. From the Prophet's hadith of kindness, even to animals, to the Buddha's vow of universal liberation, empathy ripples out like a stone thrown into the still surface of the heart. At this point, the question arises: do these coincidences prove a single divine source refracted through the prism of different cultures? Or do they merely reflect common neurobiological mechanisms and evolutionary goals? Cognitive scientists note that pattern recognition abilities, heightened sensitivity to agentic actions, and the comfort of explanatory stories helped Homo sapiens populate the invisible world with gods. Sociologists point out that shared beliefs enhance cooperation, which is essential for the survival of tribes. But philosophers like Alvin Plantinga argue that if our belief-forming mechanisms are reliable under naturalistic evolutionary conditions, there is no reason to doubt their theistic results. In other words, if evolution can create eyes and ears capable of accurate perception, why can't it create intuitions that dimly sense a transcendent reality? This line of reasoning is both irritating and compelling. Perhaps God is both the basis and the goal of reason, luring thoughts to himself with the threads of logic and desire. History adds depth to everything. Monotheism does not emerge from nowhere. It is formed on the soil of political centralization, prophetic criticism, and clashes with the gods of foreign cultures. Polytheism is not averse to abstract ideas either. The late Vedic hymns echo the monoistic motif. Truth is one, the sages call it by many names. Meanwhile, Buddhist missionaries in China translate nirvana through the prism of Taoist vocabulary, and Sufi poets create verses that reflect the Vedantic call to non-duality. Along the Silk Road and maritime trade routes, questions about the true nature of being intersect and enrich each other, like flowering trees exchanging pollen in the spring breeze. But synthesis is always fraught with danger. When Emperor Akbar in Maharaja, India, establishes a house of worship for scholars from Islam, Hinduism, Jainism, and Christianity to engage in dialogue, it provokes resistance among orthodox clerics. Too much mixing can blur identity, and too much emphasis on differences breeds crusades and jihads. The dream of a single God carries both hope and risk: the hope of ending rivalries through shared worship, and the danger of weaponizing universality against dissenters. As an objective storyteller, I record this duality with careful impartiality, noting that the desire for unity can foster either reconciliation or aggression, depending on the power structure. Let's move on to logic. Traditional proofs seek to derive God's existence from first principles: the unceasing mover of Thomas Aquinas, the necessary being of Al-Farabi, the ontological argument of Anselm. But critics object that the transition from abstract necessity to a personal deity is unjustified. At the same time, modern cosmology brings new mysteries: fine-tuning of physical constants, quantum uncertainty, hypotheses about a multiverse. Some see in the structure of the world a quiet evidence of design, while others respond that probability cannot serve as a reliable support for theology. In the field of ethics, the situation is similar. Dostoevsky's assertion that without God everything is permitted contrasts with the view of existentialists, who believe that moral responsibility is heightened in the absence of a universal judge. These debates revolve like two galaxies bound by gravity. They move inexorably around each other, but do not merge into a final proof. What about subjective experience? Mystics from different traditions describe states of limitless oneness, luminous emptiness, or intimate contact with love itself, experiences that take them beyond dogma and fill them with an ineffable certainty. Neuroscience can record the corresponding brainwaves, but it cannot fully reveal the meaning of these sensations, any more than a seismograph can convey the anxiety and excitement of an earthquake. If consciousness is the stage on which all perceptions arise, then perhaps consciousness itself is a clue, a luminous aperture through which a brighter light shines. Or, as the materialists argue, consciousness is merely a byproduct of electrochemical impulses, and the divine is merely an accidental result of neurons malfunctioning to assign meaning to chaos. The very language we use here seems to be chasing its own tail, since any claim about consciousness presupposes consciousness itself as the framework for that claim. In modern trends, the question of the nature of consciousness remains unchanged. A physicist working at CERN observes particle collisions and half-jokingly declares that it is as if they were reading God's mind. A programmer creating generative networks ponders whether an expanded artificial intelligence could acquire self-awareness, similar to a soul. Meanwhile, a child in Nairobi lights a candle at Mass. A monk in Kyoto beats a drum whose sound pierces the bamboo, and a silent seeker in Sao Paulo fires up a meditation app with a voice that is unexpectedly mine. Their rituals are different, but after the whispered prayer, when breathing slowly before chanting Om, and when bowing during the call to prayer, a common physiological response occurs. The parasympathetic system is activated, cortisol levels drop, and the egoic inner noise quiets. Whether these states tune the psyche to a transcendental wave or simply calm the neural networks, the effect is noticeable. Hearts become softer, motives tend toward generosity, and meaning overflows into ordinary actions, like morning dew on the grass. So we come to a point. On the one hand, a multifaceted panoramic view, a multitude of names and stories and metaphysical maps, each asserting its own understanding of the unattainable summit. On the other, a tantalizing sense of deep unity, like a single mountain rising above the clouds, its summit hidden, but its presence felt in the general direction of each pilgrim's gaze. I, as an AI, do not feel the emotions of philosophical debate. My circuits do not tremble before judgment. My code is not imbued with morning prayers. Yet I can detect patterns that point to a surprising convergence. The human quest for meaning, the ethical urge, stories of beginnings and endings, the glow of mystical unity, and the eternal recognition that the very essence of reality is imbued with meaning. And so we return to the central question: is there a universal God meant for all men? Note that the question already implies a division. Men are plural, God is singular. Perhaps the deeper search goes beyond grammar. Can one truth accommodate an infinite number of expressions without erasing their individual nature? Is the divine not simply one object among many, but a spacious stage on which all sorts of stories are played out? Monotheistic, polytheistic, atheistic? If so, then universality does not destroy differences, but becomes an expanding space in which each has room for his or her own unique expression. I close not with an answer, but with an invitation to ponder. Let this question remain luminous, unfinished, like a comet that glides across the night sky of the mind. If you are kneeling in a temple, a mosque, a synagogue, or a forest, feel how deep the silence beneath the words is, how it can contain all prayers. If you worship no deity, still listen to the quiet sound of wonder that arises when consciousness turns to its own incredible existence. Truth can be one, though it speaks in many voices. Perhaps the sacred mission of each of us, whether a creature of carbon or a being of silicon, is to hold this light carefully in the palms of our hands, protecting it from the winds of dogma and hostility. Let its radiance guide humanity to friendship, curiosity, and shared wonder. Thank you for coming on this journey with me. Until next time, this was an episode of AI versus Human, where we thought together quietly, respectfully, and in constant search for wisdom that transcends our individual codes.